U.S. President Donald Trump and China's Vice Premier Liu He have signed the first phase of the U.S.-China trade deal. Under the agreement, Washington will suspend the imposition of new tariffs on Chinese goods. In return, Beijing will purchase an additional $200 billion in U.S. goods. It is hoped that this deal will end months of tensions and a war of words instigated by the U.S. president. Trump has repeatedly accused China of practicing unfair trade practices and charges that the Asian giant has strongly denied. On the other hand, Beijing has accused the U.S. of engaging in protectionism and unfairly targeting Chinese companies such as telecommunication giant Huawei.
I want to thank President Xi, who is watching as we speak, and I'll be going over to China in the not-too-distant future to reciprocate. But I want to thank President Xi, a very, very good friend of mine. We're representing different countries. He's representing China. I'm representing the U.S. But we've developed an incredible relationship. But I want to thank him for his cooperation and partnership throughout this very complex process.
The Russian government has resigned after President Vladimir Putin proposed changes to the constitution. The news came shortly after Putin delivered his annual State of the Nation address and suggested a referendum so citizens could vote on the amendments. Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev told reporters in a joint media conference with Putin that the proposals would make significant changes to the country's balance of power, and as such, he believed it was necessary for the parliament to be dissolved. President Putin said the outgoing PM would take on a new job as deputy head of Russia's Security Council.
The changes to the constitution, when they are adopted, they will introduce significant changes not only to a number of articles of the constitution, but also to the general balance of power. It is obvious that we, as the government of the Russian Federation, should provide the president of our country with the opportunity to make all the necessary decisions for this. In these conditions, I believe it would be right that, in accordance with the Article 117 of the Constitution of the Russian Federation, the current government of the Russian Federation resigns.
Now, it was during his annual address to the parliament that Russian President Vladimir Putin proposed a referendum to amend the constitution. Citizens would vote on key changes, including increasing the constitution's supremacy over international law, as well as tightening background requirements for presidential candidates.
Considering that the proposed innovations related to significant changes in the political system, the activities of the executive, legislative, and judicial branches, I consider it necessary to conduct a vote by the country's citizens on an entire package of proposed amendments to the Constitution and to make a final decision on its results.
A new migrant caravan has set off from Honduras towards the United States with over 2,000 people. The group gathered in the city of San Pedro Sula on Tuesday night before taking off early on Wednesday. The migrants say that despite the dangers ahead and the anti-immigrant policies of the U.S. government, they are willing to take the risk in order to find better opportunities for themselves and their families. Since the U.S.-backed coup of 2009, Honduras has become the poorest and most violent country, leading to tens of thousands of migrants taking the perilous journey. The Venezuelan Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza has arrived in China for a 4-day diplomatic visit. Arreaza will meet with his Chinese counterpart to discuss the situation in Venezuela in regards to the tightening of the U.S. blockade and the many attempts to overthrow the government. For his part, China's Foreign Minister Geng Shuang said this visit will help find a political solution to the situation in Venezuela as early as possible and also maintain stability in Latin America and the Caribbean. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro gave his annual address to the nation on Tuesday, where he spoke about some of the ongoing victories of the Bolivarian Revolution. He highlighted the Venezuela housing mission as one of the most important accomplishments, as well as other social and economic projects undertaken.
This is the most successful housing program in the world. The Venezuela Housing Mission, a bright example of our social model. It makes housing a human right for all families, not a product to be sold. This model is part of the main structure of our revolution and has guaranteed the construction and delivery of 3 million houses as of December 2019, quality housing, under the principles of good living, a community model. From 2001 until 2011, when the revolution was beginning, Hugo Chavez delivered more than 600,000 homes, and until now, we have gone past 3 million houses in 20 years of our revolution. In 2003, in the first years of the revolution, we were overcoming coups, a sabotage of our oil production systems, and that's when the social missions were born, as a result of the vision of Commander Hugo Chavez and his faith in our people. Now we have fully grown food production and distribution centers, our Homeland ID program, the We Are Venezuela movement, and the Petro cryptocurrency, all of them an example of our capacity to respond to adversity.
This was the first mobilization of Venezuela's revolutionary forces in 2020. They took to the streets with joy, despite the difficulties of the previous year, a year marked by continuous destabilization attempts. This time they marched to the National Constituent Assembly's building to accompany President Nicolas Maduro during his annual State of the National Address.
Our motivation is to support our working-class president. The people are here in support of peace, of the revolution, with the hope of taking our country forward to the future. Maduro can count on all of us.
This is a popular force driven by the spirit of Chavez, of his political convictions and the many challenges that he fought against.
In our revolution, neither Maduro nor Chavez ever fell, because this is a government of the people. In the past, we had no pensions. There were almost no social programs.
Nicolas Maduro has proven himself to be a man of peace, a great strategist who has worked to solve the many issues plaguing Venezuela. He proved to be the right successor to Chavez, a man of great value and a deep human conviction.
1 year ago, one of the most difficult periods of Venezuela's political history started, with the manipulation of the United States. But the Chavista people have the hope that the worst has passed.
The most difficult year was 2019, but thanks to the conscience, education and maturity of our people, we remained and will remain in peace.
The Bolivarian Revolution has set an ambitious agenda for itself this year. In regards to helping the economy recover, it also planned to fix its mistakes and increase the military and diplomatic defense of the nation, relying on community organizations to do so.
A great part of our youth still believes in this process. With the many opportunities it gives us, we have access to education, to cultural programs, to sports, to housing, to the many missions of our revolution. That's why we believe in this process and continue defending it. That's why we take to the streets and support the truth we believe in, our peace, our sovereignty, and reject North America's interference.
In 2020, Chavismo has a new electoral battle, as the country awaits the announcement of the dates for parliamentary.
Coming up, political persecution continues against members of Evo Morales' mass party in Bolivia. Details after this. Welcome back. Bolivia's former Interior Minister Carlos Romero has been arrested by the de facto government just days after being hospitalized. Security forces dragged Romero out of the medical institution and took him to a local jail for alleged corruption. Last Friday, Romero collapsed inside his home and was taken to a hospital where he was diagnosed with hypertension, anxiety, and depression. For days, far-right mobs had been gathering outside his home and even outside the facility to make threats against him and his family. Meanwhile, the deposed president of Bolivia, Evo Morales, took to Twitter to condemn the persecution against Carlos Romero. Morales said irregular groups harassed the former minister at his home. Then they harassed him at a hospital and dragged him out, putting his life at risk. We hold the de facto government responsible for this inhuman act and for whatever happens to Carlos.
A police operation dragged former Interior Minister Carlos Romero out of the hospital where he was being treated and took him before the judge in charge of an alleged corruption lawsuit against him. Soon after, the judge ordered the imprisonment of Romero.
They allow harassment, allow persecution. There were mobs at his house. They didn't allow the family to live. They cut off their water. They harassed people who came to visit them.
This case has caused commotion in Bolivia because Romero was not under any judicial investigations, to the point that until 1 week ago he walked on the streets without problems. But then, an alleged Spanish journalist harassed him on the street, giving a sign to far-right mobs to gather around his home and harass him and his family.
I've been kidnapped in my own house. They have shut down the water. I have no food or water. And the ones who call themselves security guards make fun of me.
Health complications forced him to be moved to a clinic where the far-right mobs who supports the de facto government continued to harass him. After 4 days in hospital, the police arrested him.
The Ministry of Revenge has set its sights on this official that has allegedly committed crimes. But they don't care that any complaint must be proven true, according to two of the main principles in the Constitution, due process and the presumption of innocence, both of which are being fully ignored.
Former Minister Romero had requested protection from the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights, given that just when the coup was completed last November, the de facto government announced a witch hunt against all previous authorities and people who criticized the regime.
Moving to the Caribbean, Trinidad and Tobago sprinter Michelle Lee Ahi has been banned from running in competitions for 2 years and will not participate in the 2020 Tokyo Olympics. The International Athletics Integrity Unit, AIU, said the 27-year-old was blocked after missing 3 dope tests between 2018 to 2019. She is expected to appeal the decision. Ahi won the first ever gold medal for a female Trinidadian track and field athlete at the 2018 Commonwealth Games for the 100-meter race. She also won silver at the Pan American Games last year and competed in the 2012 and 2016 Summer Olympics. Staying in Trinidad and Tobago, students at the primary school level are gearing up for the secondary entrance assessment exam on April 2nd. Barbados Prime Minister Mia Amor Motley said her country would abolish the exam as it was too stressful for 10 and 11-year-olds. However, Trinidad's Minister of Education said that was not an option.
If we are to abolish the essay exam at this stage, it means that we will have to find an alternative method of transitioning our students from primary to secondary school. We have been looking at this for some time now, and we are yet to come up with a formula that will allow the transition of students from primary to secondary school without having any problems with respect to the church and also with respect to the right of the parent to choose.
In his address to the nation on Sunday, St. Lucia's Prime Minister Alan Chasney acknowledged his government's successes in improving security and justice, healthcare, education, investments, and commencing major projects.
One of our first actions was to fulfill our general election promise to ease the burdens on the entire population. We immediately implemented the 5 to stay alive. We reduced the 15% VAT. We put a freeze on property taxes. We introduced an amnesty on hospital bills. We reduced the vehicle license cost. We doubled the allocations for school feeding and transportation programs. Other measures included doubling the budgetary allocation for agriculture, addressing deficiencies in the security and justice system, starting the phased transition to the OKEU hospital. We've spent millions on improving the infrastructure in almost every constituency, creating economic benefits and employment.
Over to Europe. The meeting of the G5 Sahel nations has come to an end in Paris, with France's President Emmanuel Macron vowing to step up the fight against jihadist groups in the Sahel region of Africa. The G5 meeting was called by the French president to review military intervention in the region despite growing condemnation of the continued presence of French troops and weapons in nations such as Burkina Faso and Mali.
This summit is just folklore. Nothing has changed. Nothing has evolved in relation to the demands of Malians. We have gone out to a lot of towns. We have asked for French troops to withdraw from Mali, but they have made other proposals, which was not a surprise to us. We already knew that our heads of state were no match for Macron.
We are asking legitimate questions. What is the point of this impressive military hardware if terrorists just carry on bullying us in our territory? So what we want is accountability and justification for the stationing of French troops in the Sahel. They are the ones who are at issue, and that is why we are only talking about them. The day that American or Russian armed forces are involved, we will have the same anger towards denouncing them.
In North America, the United States House of Representatives has voted to send articles of impeachment against Donald Trump to the Senate. Lawmakers voted along party lines with 228 in favor and 193 against. This is a key step in Democratic efforts to remove the president for abuse of power and obstruction of Congress. The historic Senate impeachment trial is expected to begin in the coming days. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi told the chamber shortly before the vote that it's not political, it's not partisan, it's patriotic. Mozambicans have sworn in their president. Stay with us for more. Welcome back. At least 2 people have died and several others were injured in a massive explosion at a petrochemical plant in northeastern Spain. More than 30 firefighters were deployed to extinguish the flames and search for other possible victims. Authorities say the massive smoke gathering above the wreckage is not toxic, yet the Ministry of Health warned locals to stay inside their homes as direct contact with the smoke can cause respiratory irritations and eye problems. In the first ministerial meeting of the new Spanish government, the first measure taken by the executive power was to revalue pensions by 0.9% according to the average inflation estimate. But many other social adjustments lay ahead as the government seeks regional support for their budget.
This is how the members of the Spanish government arrived at their first council meeting, but before it started, a family photo. On their way out, the first measure announced was the increase in pensions by 0.9%.
The recovery of purchasing power for retirees is one of the commitments that we, the Socialist Party, and the Unidas Podemos signed in our progressive coalition agreement.
But there was also the first controversy. The government proposed that former Minister of Justice Dolores Delgado take over as the new Attorney General. Criticism was swift.
It's a decision that directly attacks the separation of powers and the independence of the AG's office. The People's Party will not accept the pretension to dejudicialize politics, but we will fight relentlessly to depoliticize justice.
But Sanchez defends his decision. However, it's a move that could set a precedent.
I believe that the public prosecutor's office is very much compromised, and that from now on any government will be entitled to appoint a minister of its own as Attorney General. This is not a good sign, although we must also recognize and remember that the Attorney Generals have always been in favor of the ruling government.
Many believe Dolores Delgado could take a looser position with the imprisoned Catalan independence leaders, something that could be determined by Parliament.
Stability between the coalition government, I think, is pretty much guaranteed. They need each other and need their coalition to work. Both sides would like this government to last 4 years, but we don't know very well how it will pan out, because everything depends on the conflict in Catalonia and the Catalan hornet's nest.
And to earn Catalonia's support for future budgets, Sanchez continues to promise dialogue.
I certainly have no problem meeting with the president of the Generalitat of Catalonia, because he is still the president of that region. Therefore, the cabinet are arranging that meeting. I had a telephone conversation with Mr. Torra and agreed we will have that meeting as soon as possible.
This is how the new government, the first coalition since Spain's return to democracy, has set off. Pablo Iglesias and Pedro Sanchez have said that while their government will have different voices, at the end of the day, they will come together.
Mozambique's Filipe Nyusi has been sworn in for a second term as president of the South African nation. The ceremony was attended by several African heads of state and thousands of jubilant supporters. Opposition parliamentarians who disputed Nyusi's victory boycotted the event. This as the illegal challenge was dismissed by the country's Supreme Court in November last year.
I, Felipe Jacinto Nyusi, swear on my honor to respect and enforce the Constitution, to faithfully perform the office of the President of the Republic of Mozambique, to dedicate all my energy on defense and national unity, human rights, democracy, the well-being of the Mozambican people, and justice to all citizens.
Iran's Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif has blamed European countries and the United States for violating the 2015 nuclear deal. Speaking during a conference in India, Zarif also criticized the European Union for allowing the US to bully them around.
Read paragraph 3 of Annex 2. They need to show effect. So you look outside and you see I don't need to go to any court to show that there is no effect. They're not buying oil from us. All of the companies have withdrawn from Iran. So Europe is in violation, not of its commitments after US withdrawal, but of its commitments in the JCPOA. They say, we're not responsible for what the United States did. Okay, but you're independent countries. Europe, EU is the largest global economy. So why do you allow the United States to bully you?
Cambodia's opposition leader has called for swift justice as his trial for treason commences. Kem Sokha was arrested in 2017 on accusations of conspiring with foreign entities to overthrow the government. His party was subsequently dissolved ahead of the widely criticized 2018 elections, which saw the now government victorious in the uncontested polls. Sokha has since dismissed the charge against him as politically motivated.
I, co-lawyers and client appealed to the non-pen court of first instance to drop the charges so that my client has freedom because my client did not commit the offense he is accused of by authorities.
And we end with news in the Middle East. The first international film festival of the Nakba has started in Palestine, paying tribute to their struggle for freedom.
More than 70 years have passed since the 1948 Palestinian exodus, also known as the Nakba, occurred, when more than 700,000 Palestinian Arabs fled or were expelled from their homes during the 1948 Palestine War. But the wounds have never healed. Now an international film festival honors the history of this painful journey of Palestinians in their endless fight to reclaim their land.
We wanted to send a message in a language that everybody understands, through movies. Despite the years and decades that have passed, and the adults who have died, we as Palestinian people won't forget about the children.
We demonstrate that we are fighting this occupation through images, through sounds, through movies and dramas. We're fighting with art as much as with military.
Most of the around 70 films showcased addresses issues around the Great March of Return, which is a series of protests staged each Friday in the Gaza Strip, near the Gaza-Israel border since March 2018.
When we filmed and were close to the border, we were in anguish to be so close to our country which is occupied by the Jews. But soon, if God permits, we will free our land.
The festival highlights just how multi-layered is the desire of the Palestinians to reclaim their land. Thanks to their stories, we can see narratives that often remain hidden from the rest of the world, if it weren't for these filmmakers.
And with that, we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Doris Polo. Thanks for watching.